My best friend stole my fiancé. I got the ultimate revenge. I used to believe in fairy tales. I thought I had the perfect life. A successful career, a loving fiancé, and a best friend I trusted more than anyone. But fairy tales are just that. Stories. And mine turned into a nightmare when my best friend Jessica stole my fiancé, Daniel, just weeks before our wedding. It started with subtle things. Jessica always helping Daniel with his work. Late night calls she brushed off as nothing, and secretive whispers when they thought I wasn't looking. I ignored the signs. I trusted them both. But then, the truth came crashing down. One evening, I received an anonymous message with a picture. Jessica and Daniel, wrapped in each other's arms at a hotel. My heart stopped. My stomach twisted into knots. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The confrontation was explosive. Jessica smirked as if she'd won some twisted game. Daniel stammered through pathetic excuses. "It just happened," he said. "We didn't mean to hurt you." They deserved each other, but I wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. I canceled the wedding and walked away with my dignity. But I wasn't done. Jessica always wanted to be me, to have my success, my connections, my life. So I gave her exactly what she wanted. Only I made sure it came with consequences. I had spent years helping Jessica build her career. With a few well-placed calls, I pulled the strings that unraveled it. The company she had just secured a partnership with? Gone. The industry contacts I had introduced her to? I made sure they knew the truth about her character. Within a month, Jessica was blacklisted from the business world she had clawed her way into. And Daniel? Let's just say that the house we were supposed to move into together was under my name. I sold it, for a profit, and used the money to take the honeymoon trip I had planned, alone. I posted every picture, every moment of my newfound freedom, knowing they were watching. Months later, Jessica showed up at my door, looking broken. "I made a mistake," she admitted, tears in her eyes. I smiled, sipping my wine. "Yes, you did." And I closed the door in her face. Some betrayals deserve forgiveness. Theirs didn't. And in the end, I got the ultimate revenge. Happiness, success, and the satisfaction of knowing they lost everything while I thrived. Because karma, my dear, always comes back around. Jessica stood outside my door, looking like a shadow of the woman she used to be. Her once perfect hair was unkempt, her designer clothes slightly wrinkled. But it was her eyes, defeated, hollow, that told me everything I needed to know. She had lost. I let her stand there for a few seconds longer, watching as she tried to summon the confidence she once wielded like a weapon. Then, without another word, I shut the door in her face. I should have felt triumphant. I had taken back my power, destroyed the people who had betrayed me, and moved on. But as I stood there, listening to the sound of Jessica's footsteps retreating, something inside me shifted. I wasn't done yet. Jessica and Daniel deserved each other, but that didn't mean they got to crawl away and rebuild a new life in peace. No, I wanted them to feel the full weight of their choices, so I did what I do best. I plotted. I knew Jessica would try to climb her way back up. And Daniel? Well, he was nothing without the money and stability I had brought into his life. I had made sure of that. A little digging and some well-placed social media stalking led me to exactly what I needed. Jessica and Daniel had moved into a small apartment in a not-so-great part of town. Jessica was working at a low-level job, and Daniel was bouncing between freelance gigs, nowhere near the big things he always bragged about. It wasn't enough. I had connections, and I knew exactly how to use them. A few whispers in the right ears, and suddenly Daniel was losing job opportunities left and right. Every contract fell through. Every lead dried up. He couldn't figure out why, but I knew. Jessica, on the other hand, was desperate to rebuild her career. I made sure the one company still willing to hire her was a place where she would work under an old acquaintance of mine, a woman who had no patience for disloyalty. Jessica lasted 2 months before she was fired. Then, for the finishing touch, I decided to let the world see the truth. At what would have been my wedding reception, I hosted a new beginnings party instead. It was extravagant, filled with people who actually cared about me. And at the height of the evening, I unveiled a little surprise, a slideshow featuring Jessica and Daniel's affair. Every text, every picture, every smug, stolen moment. I didn't name names, but everyone knew. And in an industry where reputation was everything, that was all it took. Jessica and Daniel weren't just ruined. They were erased. Months passed, and I flourished. My business expanded, I traveled, I thrived. I met people who lifted me up instead of tearing me down. And the best revenge of all? I was happy. One day, while grabbing coffee at my favorite cafe, I saw Jessica again. She was sitting alone, staring into her drink. She looked exhausted, defeated. She caught my eye, and for a second, I thought she might say something. But she didn't. She just looked away, as if even facing me was too much to bear. I smiled to myself as I walked past her, head held high. Jessica had taken what she thought she wanted. But in the end, I was the one who won. Because revenge wasn't just about destroying them. It was about rebuilding myself into someone stronger. And that was the ultimate victory. I walked past Jessica without a word, feeling nothing but satisfaction. I thought that was the end of it, that I had closed the chapter on her and Daniel forever. But life has a funny way of circling back when you least expect it. One evening, while scrolling through social media, a message popped up. Jessica, please, I need to talk to you. It's important. I scoffed. The nerve. I was about to ignore it, but something in me hesitated. Curiosity? Maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to see how much further she could fall. So I responded, why would I ever want to talk to you? Jessica, because it's about Daniel. And trust me, you're going to want to hear this. I debated for a moment, then agreed to meet her at a quiet rooftop bar. I expected her to show up confident, with some manipulative scheme, but when she arrived, she was shaking. Her makeup, usually flawless, barely covered the dark circles under her eyes. She clutched her drink and leaned in. Daniel's not who we thought he was. I smirked. Oh, you just figured that out? She shook her head. No, I mean, he's dangerous. That caught my attention. Jessica pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. Look at this. It was a series of emails. Daniel had been embezzling money from his previous employer. Not only that, but he had racked up debt. Massive amounts of it. And now? The people he owed money to were looking for him. And you, I said slowly, are caught in the middle of it. Jessica nodded, looking truly terrified for the first time in her life. I thought he loved me, but the moment things got bad, he turned on me. He stole from me. He drained my accounts and disappeared. Her voice cracked. I have nothing left. I sat back, letting her words settle. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. She had stolen my future, only to have hers stolen right back. So why tell me? I asked. What do you want from me? She swallowed hard. Help me take him down. I laughed. And why would I do that? Because if we don't stop him now, she whispered, he's going to do this to someone else. She wasn't wrong. Daniel was a parasite, moving from one host to another. If he wasn't stopped, someone else would get hurt. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't done with my revenge just yet. I leaned forward, meeting her desperate gaze. All right, Jessica, let's destroy him. Jessica and I had every reason to hate each other. She'd stolen my fiancé, and I had systematically dismantled her life. But now? Now we had a common enemy. Daniel, the man who had betrayed me, used her, and left a trail of destruction in his wake. And it was time for payback. We met the next day at my apartment, both of us still unsure if we could really trust one another. But the enemy of my enemy is my weapon, and that was enough for now. Jessica filled me in on everything. Daniel had been using stolen money to keep up his flashy lifestyle. convincing investors to trust him while secretly funneling funds into private accounts. The people he had stolen from weren't just angry, they were dangerous. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. So where is he now? Jessica hesitated. I don't know for sure, but I have an idea. She pulled out her phone and showed me a message from Daniel. It was short, vague, and full of his usual charm. Jess, I messed up. I need you. Meet me at our spot. Our spot. The hotel they used to sneak around in behind my back. I smirked. Well, isn't that poetic? We needed a plan. A good one. Turning him over to the police was an option, but I wanted something more. Personal. We decided on a two-step approach. First, Jessica would meet with him, playing the role of the desperate ex-girlfriend still under his spell. She'd get him to admit everything on a recorded call. His scams, his debts, and anything that could be used against him. Meanwhile, I'd make sure the right people got that information. His former business partners, the people he had stolen from, and of course, law enforcement. It was risky. If he caught on, things could go south fast. But I was done playing it safe. That night, Jessica met Daniel in the dimly lit hotel bar. I watched from a distance, hidden in the corner, my phone recording every second. Daniel looked terrible. His once expensive suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven, his usual confidence replaced with paranoia. He grabbed Jessica's hands, squeezing too tight. I knew you'd come back, he said, voice low. We were good together, Jess. You know that. She played her part well, biting her lip, nodding. I missed you, Danny, she whispered. But I need to know the truth. What happened? And just like that, his ego took over. He confessed to everything. The fraud, the stolen money, even the investors who were out for blood. Bingo. I sent the recording to my contacts. Within minutes, the walls around Daniel started to collapse. His phone buzzed. One message, then another. His expression darkened. He looked at Jessica. What did you do? Before she could answer, the doors swung open. Two men stepped inside. Men Daniel clearly recognized. His face drained of color. Jessica stood. You stole from the wrong people, Daniel. I stepped out of the shadows, smirking. And from the wrong woman. Panic set in. He turned to run, but the men grabbed him before he could even make it to the door. You have a lot of explaining to do, one of them said, dragging him away. Jessica and I watched as Daniel was pulled out of the hotel, his fate sealed. She turned to me, exhaling shakily. Well, that was satisfying. I clinked my glass against hers. Cheers to karma. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Daniel was gone. Jessica had nothing left to take from me, and I was finally, truly moving on. And that was the ultimate revenge. As Daniel was dragged out of the hotel, I felt an unexpected weight lift off my shoulders. The man who had once broken my heart, who had made me question my worth, was finally getting what he deserved. Jessica and I sat in silence for a moment, sipping our drinks, both processing what had just happened. She finally exhaled. So, what now? I smirked, swirling the wine in my glass. Now? Now we move on. Or so I thought. Over the next few days, news of Daniel's downfall spread fast. His former business partners wanted nothing to do with him. The people he had scammed were demanding their money back. Some legally, others not so legally. He had become a ghost, someone whispered about in hushed conversations, but never actually seen. Then Jessica called me in the middle of the night. You need to come over, now. I arrived at her apartment to find her pale and shaking, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. She handed it to me without a word. It was a note. You think you've won. But this isn't over. No signature. No clue who had written it. But we both knew. Daniel wasn't done yet. I should have known he wouldn't go down quietly. Daniel had always been manipulative, always one step ahead. But this was different. I haven't seen him, Jessica whispered. I don't know where he is, but I feel like I'm being watched. I clenched my jaw. No way was I letting him get the last move in this game. All right, I said. If Daniel wants to play, let's play. We needed to find him first. Jessica started searching through her old emails and messages, trying to track down any clue as to where he might be hiding. I reached out to some contacts, people who owed me favors, and then, finally, we got a lead. Daniel was staying in a rundown motel just outside the city, living under a fake name. He was desperate, cornered, and, most importantly, alone. It was time to finish this. Jessica and I drove to the motel that night. The place was barely standing, the neon sign flickering, casting eerie shadows across the cracked pavement. We spotted his car immediately. The same black BMW he had once used to impress investors, now covered in dust and barely running. Jessica swallowed hard. Are we really doing this? I looked at her, my heart pounding. We finish what we started. We knocked on the door. No answer. Then I tried the handle. It was unlocked. The room was dark, the air thick with the stench of cheap liquor and regret. Papers were scattered across the floor. Daniel sat slumped on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. He looked up slowly, and for the first time, I saw him for what he really was. Not the confident, charming man I once loved, but a broken, desperate fraud. He let out a bitter laugh. Came to gloat? I crossed my arms. No, Daniel. I came to make sure you're done ruining lives. Jessica stepped forward. You wanted to threaten us? Well, now we're here. So go ahead. Say whatever pathetic thing you were planning to say. He shook his head, rubbing his face. You don't get it, do you? I lost everything. I tilted my head. No, Daniel. You threw it away. For a moment, there was silence. Then Jessica pulled something out of her pocket and tossed it onto the bed. A flash drive. What's this? Daniel muttered. Jessica smirked. Every last piece of evidence on you. Bank fraud, stolen money, lies, all of it. We already sent copies to the police, but if you try to come after us again, this goes public. His face twisted with anger. You wouldn't... I leaned in, my voice deadly calm. Try me. He stared at us for a long moment. Then, without another word, he dropped his head into his hands. Defeated. I turned to Jessica. Let's go. As we walked out of the room, leaving Daniel to his fate, I felt it. Real, undeniable closure. Not just revenge. Justice. And for the first time in a long time, I was finally free. As Jessica and I walked away from Daniel's motel room, I should have felt victorious. We had crushed him, exposed his lies, and ensured that he had nowhere left to run. But something didn't sit right. Jessica, usually quick with a smug comment, was silent. Her fingers trembled as she lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply. You okay? I asked. She let out a shaky laugh. I don't know, it's just... I thought this would feel better. I knew what she meant. Revenge was satisfying, but it didn't erase the damage he had done. It didn't take back the time, the heartbreak, or the trust he had shattered. Come on, I said, leading her toward my car. Let's just get out of here. We had barely made it to the parking lot when we heard a sound. A loud bang. We froze. Jessica turned to me, eyes wide. Was that? Another bang echoed through the air. The motel room window shattered. Daniel, I ran back, heart pounding. Jessica hesitated, but followed. When we burst into the room, we found him slumped on the floor, a gun in his hand, blood pooling beneath him. My stomach twisted. Daniel! Jessica screamed, running to him. He was still alive, barely. His breaths were ragged, his eyes glossy. He tried to speak, but only blood bubbled at his lips. Jessica shook him. You idiot! Why would you do this? I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking as I dialed emergency services. He coughed weakly, eyes flickering between us. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "You win." And then, nothing. Jessica sobbed. I stood frozen, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. We had wanted to destroy him, but not like this. The paramedics arrived minutes later, pushing us aside as they worked to stabilize him. One of them turned to us. "He's alive, but just barely. If he makes it through the night, it'll be a miracle." Jessica covered her mouth, shaking her head. Oh my God. I took a deep breath. The man who had hurt us, betrayed us, and ruined lives was lying on the edge of death. And somehow it didn't feel like victory. 2 weeks later, Daniel survived. Barely. The bullet had missed anything vital, but he was in critical condition. He wouldn't be walking out of the hospital anytime soon. And when he did, he'd be walking straight into a jail cell. The police had taken our evidence, and now that Daniel had tried to end things, they were digging even deeper into his crimes. Fraud, embezzlement, threats. His list of offenses was long, and he wasn't getting out of this one. Jessica and I sat in a cafe, watching the news report about his impending trial. She stirred her coffee absently. I still don't know how to feel about all of this. I sighed. Me neither. Revenge was supposed to feel good, but instead it left a bitter aftertaste. One thing was clear, though. Daniel was out of our lives for good. And that was enough.